The cold emptiness of space echoed with the hum of failing engines. Humanity's last fleet drifted in the outer edges of the solar system, its once mighty ships now battered and scarred. The fleet's commanders knew they had little time left. Alien forces, a coalition of relentless species united by a singular goal, human extinction, had pressed them to this point. They were outnumbered. They were outgunned. And the tide of war had turned so far against them that most of the remaining crew members were simply waiting for the inevitable end. Admiral Sarah Hayes stood in the command center of the Resolve, humanity's flagship, her face pale from exhaustion. She stared out into the vast expanse of the cosmos, a million thoughts racing through her mind. The battle had been going on for months. Every engagement had been a bloodbath, with humanity slowly losing more and more ground. The alien invaders, led by the brutal Vocari species, seemed unstoppable, superior in every way. Their ships were sleek, fast, and equipped with devastating weapons that outmatched even humanity's best. The human fleet, in comparison, was little more than a series of old warships cobbled together from every corner of Earth's remaining colonies. Each of the ships had seen better days, and most of the crew was exhausted beyond measure. "Admiral, the Vocari are advancing again." Commander Finn Albright's voice broke through the silence, pulling Hayes from her reverie. She turned to him, her mind still reeling from the weight of their situation. "They've moved into firing range. Our defenses are almost gone." Hayes knew what was coming. She had hoped for a miracle, but the reality was far too grim. The alien armada, hundreds strong, was closing in on them from all sides. The Resolve was surrounded, trapped in a deadly web, with nowhere to run. The Vocari had the numbers. They had the firepower. And they had humanity's only remaining colonies in their sights. "We have to hold them off," Hayes said, her voice colder than she felt. "Get every ship into formation. We fight for Earth. We fight for the future." But even as she said the words, she knew they were meaningless. The fleet could not hold out much longer. As the command center hummed with frantic activity, a chill ran down her spine. She could feel the end was near. Suddenly, alarms blared across the ship. A large, unidentified object was appearing on their radar, emerging from the darkness beyond the solar system. At first, the crew assumed it was a final wave of Vocari reinforcements, but the object was unlike anything they had ever seen. It was enormous, easily the size of the Resolve, but its shape was nothing like the smooth curves of alien ships they'd faced before. It was angular, dark, and terrifying in its design, almost as if it was built to cut through the very fabric of space itself. "Captain, we're picking up strange readings," Lieutenant Jenna Ward said from the sensor station. "It's not Vocari. It's not even anything we've ever seen before. It's moving towards us." "Do we have communications?" Hayes demanded, though she already knew the answer. The alien forces had jammed all frequencies. "No signals." "Admiral," Ward replied, her voice trembling. "Then prepare for impact. All ships, brace for." But Hayes was cut off by the most unexpected thing of all. The unknown warship opened fire. A bolt of energy, brighter than a supernova, shot out from the mysterious vessel and struck the nearest Vocari cruiser. The ship exploded in a shower of debris, its pieces disintegrating in the vacuum of space. Before anyone could react, the warship fired again, then again. One alien ship after another disintegrated under the onslaught. The Vocari forces, once so confident of victory, faltered. Panic spread across their ranks as this new, powerful ship tore through them with surgical precision. Admiral Hayes stood frozen, her eyes wide with disbelief. The enemy was being destroyed, but who was doing it? And why were they here? Are they with us?" Finn asked, his voice full of cautious hope. Hayes could only watch as the mysterious warship moved through the battle, its sleek hull gleaming with deadly purpose. It tore through the Vocari forces like a predator picking off its prey, with no sign of slowing down. This was no ordinary ship, no ordinary force. Whatever it was, it had just become humanity's most unlikely ally. "Get me a channel to that ship," Hayes ordered, her voice steadier now. "We need to know who we're dealing with." But the only response was silence, as the unknown warship continued to wipe out the Volkari fleet, its motives as inscrutable as its origins. The battle for humanity's survival had just taken an unexpected turn. The Volkari forces had been thrown into chaos, their once unshakable confidence shattered as their ships were torn apart one by one. The mysterious warship cut through their ranks with terrifying precision, its weapons cutting through their advanced shields like butter. For the first time in months, humanity's fleet saw a glimmer of hope, but with it came uncertainty. Who was this new force? Why were they helping? Admiral Hayes stood at the front of the command center, her fingers pressed against the glass of the observation window as she watched the battle unfold. The strange ship moved through the alien fleet like a knife through flesh, obliterating the invaders with almost casual ease. Her heart raced, but she couldn't shake the fear gnawing at her. There was no time to be sure of anything. They had to act fast. The Volkari were disorganized now, their fleet crumbling. But this moment of confusion wouldn't last long. The aliens would regroup, adapt, and retaliate. They had to capitalize on this window of opportunity. "Commander Albright," Hayes barked, her eyes narrowing. "Prepare our fleet for a counterattack. We take advantage of their disarray. Now." "Aye, Admiral," Albright responded immediately, his voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around him. "We'll move into position." As the human fleet began to shift, aligning its remaining ships into an offensive formation, Hayes could hardly tear her eyes away from the unknown warship. Its design was almost alien, sleek, dark, and intimidating. It moved with precision, its energy blasts effortlessly ripping through the hulls of alien vessels. It wasn't just a new weapon. It was something far more sophisticated, a force all its own. It wasn't like anything humanity had ever encountered before. "Admiral," Lieutenant Ward's voice cut through the tension. "I'm picking up another anomaly. It's odd, but it's coming from the unknown ship." Hayes turned sharply to face her, heart skipping a beat. "What anomaly?" "It's not a traditional signal. It's like a..." Ward paused, squinting at her screen in confusion. "It's some kind of communication, but the structure is unrecognizable. It's not any language we know." A sudden tension filled the room. The last thing they needed was another unknown element in the mix. "Can we make any sense of it?" Hayes demanded, already steeling herself for bad news. "I'm working on it," Ward replied, her voice strained. "But it's not like anything in our database. It's almost as if it's reading us." "Reading us?" Hayes echoed in disbelief. "Like what?" "Analyzing our responses." "Exactly." Ward didn't look up, her focus entirely on the screens in front of her. "It's as though it's trying to understand how we're reacting." Hayes' mind raced. Could the warship somehow be waiting for confirmation from them? Was this ship deciding whether to fully ally with humanity? Or, perhaps more troubling, was it considering them a threat? The unknown ship's intentions were as mysterious as its arrival. "Admiral," Commander Albright's voice broke into her thoughts. "The Volkari are regrouping. They're not going to let us have this victory so easily. We need to act now." "I know," Hayes said, shaking her head to clear the fog of uncertainty. "We move in now. Full force. Let's finish this." With a firm nod, Hayes turned back to the tactical display, her mind laser-focused on the next steps. Her orders were clear: attack. But even as she gave the command, a cold sense of dread lingered in the back of her mind. The mysterious warship was an ally, for now. But what would happen when the battle was over? What was it truly after? The sound of the comm system crackled. Hayes turned quickly, hearing a voice break through the static. It was faint but unmistakable. "This is Captain Riel Darnell of the Eclipse. We're here to assist." Stand by for instructions. The voice was human. Hayes' breath caught in her chest. The warship, it seemed, was not just a strange, powerful weapon of unknown origin. It had a captain. And that captain was human. Captain Darnell. Hayes murmured, almost to herself. What in God's name is going on here? Her pulse quickened as the weight of the moment began to sink in. The battle wasn't over. It was only just beginning. Admiral Hayes could hardly believe what she had just heard. The voice on the comms was undeniably human. Captain Riel Darnell, of the Eclipse, a ship she had never heard of before. The words echoed in her mind, the reality of the situation sinking in. This wasn't just an alien weapon. It was a human vessel, or at least, it had once been. But how? Where had it come from? And why had it stayed hidden for so long? Lieutenant Ward, patch me through to Captain Darnell, Hayes ordered, her voice steady but laced with urgency. She needed answers, and she needed them now. Aye, Admiral, Ward replied, quickly working at her station. A few seconds later, the comm system came to life, and the voice of Captain Darnell resonated throughout the command center. Admiral Hayes, I'm glad you're still standing, Darnell said, her voice calm, but tinged with an edge of weariness. We've been tracking the Valkyrie for a while now, but we only just arrived. My ship was, well, it's been in deep space for longer than you can imagine. Captain, I don't understand, Hayes said, trying to keep her voice even. Who are you? Why have we never heard of you? And why are you helping us? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Hayes could hear the low hum of machinery, the faint background noise of what sounded like a warship in motion. Finally, Darnell spoke again. I know this is a lot to process, Admiral, but let me explain. The Eclipse, the ship you're seeing out there, isn't exactly new. It's a relic, a ship from a long-forgotten war, one that most of humanity has erased from its memory. Forgotten war. Hayes repeated, confusion clouding her thoughts. What are you talking about? The Centauri. Darnell's voice darkened at the name. They were the ones who nearly wiped us out in the early days of intergalactic expansion. An ancient race, with technology far beyond anything we ever dreamed of. They nearly wiped out humanity before we even had a chance to build a proper defense. The Eclipse was part of that fight, along with others. We were supposed to be humanity's last line of defense, but something went wrong. Darnell's words hung in the air like a heavy fog. Hayes felt a chill creep up her spine. She had heard whispers of the Centauri, a species so ancient and so advanced that they were more legend than fact. The idea that humanity had fought a war with them, and lost, was unfathomable. How could a war that catastrophic be forgotten? Where were you all this time? Hayes asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why didn't we know about this? Because the Centauri, they aren't gone. They've been in the shadows, manipulating things from behind the scenes. After the war, the Eclipse and a few other ships were left behind. We were supposed to finish the job, find the Centauri, and wipe them out. But we failed. We lost contact with Earth. No one knew what happened to us. We became legends, then myths. Hayes closed her eyes for a moment, trying to process everything Darnell was saying. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but the picture they formed was too surreal to accept. The warship in front of her, this Eclipse, was from an ancient conflict that had been erased from human history. It had been sent to protect humanity from a threat it had never fully understood, only for its crew to vanish into the void of space. And now, here it was, returning just when humanity needed it most. Why now? Hayes asked, trying to steady her nerves. Why return now, of all times? Because the Centauri are back, Darnell said, her voice sharp with certainty. They're behind the Valkyrie invasion. They're trying to finish what they started. We've been watching. We've seen the signs. We knew you'd be in danger again, so we made our move. Hayes felt a knot tighten in her chest. The Valkyrie, this invasion, was just a part of something far greater, a shadow war that had been brewing for centuries. She had assumed they were just facing another alien species looking for conquest, but it was so much worse than that. The Centauri were using the Valkyrie as pawns in a much larger game. "We've been keeping an eye on the Valkyrie for months," Darnell continued. "The Eclipse was built for this exact scenario. We've been waiting for the right moment to strike, to intervene. And now, it's time." Hayes took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on her. The unknown warship wasn't just a savior. It was a weapon of humanity's past, brought back to face an enemy humanity had long forgotten. "This is insane," Hayes murmured, more to herself than to anyone else. "I know," Darnell replied, her tone unexpectedly gentle. "But right now, it's the only chance we've got. The Centauri are coming, and if we don't stop them now, it'll be too late." Hayes straightened her back, determination filling her chest. She had no more time for questions or doubts. The battle was far from over, and the truth was more terrifying than she could have imagined. But one thing was certain now. Humanity had an unexpected ally in this fight. "All right, Captain Darnell," Hayes said, her voice firm. "We'll work together. Let's end this." As she turned to the display screens, the full scope of the battle lay before her. The Valkyrie were still reeling, but the Centauri were the real enemy. And now humanity had a chance, thanks to the Eclipse and its mysterious crew, who had come back from the past to save them. The war had only just begun. The truth hit Admiral Hayes harder than she had anticipated. The Eclipse, a ship from humanity's forgotten past, was not just a relic. It was part of a war so ancient that it had been erased from history, replaced with myths and vague recollections that most people had long dismissed as fantasy. The Centauri, humanity's oldest and most dangerous enemies, had nearly destroyed them centuries ago. But the Eclipse and its crew had been left behind to finish what they had started. The implications of it all were staggering. Hayes stood silently in the command center, her mind racing as she processed the information. This war, this long-hidden history, wasn't just about alien invaders. It was about humanity's survival, a struggle that had been forgotten until now. The Centauri had manipulated history, buried their existence, and now they were resurfacing, using the Valkyrie to do their bidding. If they succeeded, it wouldn't just be the Valkyrie that would be eradicated. Humanity would be next. "Admiral, we're receiving another communication from Captain Darnell," Lieutenant Ward said, her voice cutting through the thick silence. "Put it through," Hayes responded, trying to steady her nerves. The time for questions was over. They needed to act. The screen flickered, and Captain Darnell's face appeared. She looked tired but resolute, a woman who had lived through things Hayes couldn't even begin to fathom. "I know you've got a lot of questions, Admiral," Darnell began, her voice steady. "But right now, there's no time. The Valkyrie are just the beginning. The Centauri are mobilizing in the outer rim. If we don't move fast, they'll have the resources to finish the job. And this time, they won't stop at Earth." Hayes nodded, her mind working through the implications. The Eclipse wasn't just an ally. It was their most potent weapon. Darnell had said it herself. This ship was built specifically to combat the Centauri. But there was still so much they didn't know. "What exactly is the Eclipse capable of, Captain?" Hayes asked, her voice firm. "And why is it only showing up now?" Darnell's expression tightened. The Eclipse was part of a project during humanity's first days in space exploration. A select group of ships were designed to protect Earth from the Centauri. They were equipped with technology that was beyond anything we had back then. Weaponry, shields, AI systems, all far more advanced than what you have now. But after the war, after the Centauri nearly wiped us out, the ships were abandoned. The crews, they were lost. The Eclipse and a few others were left behind, out of contact, meant to return when the time was right. But we've been out of reach for so long. that people forgot about us. We were thought to be casualties. Hayes absorbed the weight of the captain's words. The Eclipse was more than just a warship. It was a time capsule, a link to humanity's past. The people aboard had fought and died to protect Earth and its future, but now they had returned to face an even greater threat than before. "You've been tracking the Centauri all this time?" Hayes asked, trying to piece together the details. "Not just the Centauri, their allies, the Volcari, and others," Darnell replied. "The Centauri have a network of species they've manipulated, pawns they control in the shadows. We've been monitoring their movements, trying to get close enough to stop them. We knew the time would come when they would make their move again." Hayes stood silently for a moment, contemplating the enormity of the situation. She had always known that space was dangerous, that humanity's survival in the galaxy was fragile. But this was different. This was something ancient, something more sinister than she had ever imagined. The Centauri were not just invaders. They were shadow manipulators, pulling strings from the dark corners of the universe. "How do we stop them?" Hayes asked, her voice filled with determination. The fight was no longer just about winning. It was about survival. They couldn't afford to fail. Darnell looked directly at Hayes, her eyes steady and calculating. The Centauri's strength lies in their ability to manipulate entire species, but their true power comes from their control of an artifact, something they've kept hidden for centuries. The artifact has the power to bend entire civilizations to their will. If we can find it, destroy it, we can cripple them. "Where is it?" Hayes asked. "We believe it's somewhere in the Centauri fleet, heavily guarded. They've kept it under tight security for generations." Hayes clenched her fists. The artifact was the key, the one thing that could shift the balance of power. If the humans could destroy it, they could break the Centauri's control over their allies and perhaps even force them into retreat. "We'll need to act quickly," Hayes said, determination in her voice. "We take down their fleet, find the artifact, and destroy it. If we can disrupt their hold over the Volcari and other species, we can stop this war before it spreads further." Darnell nodded. "Exactly. The Eclipse and your fleet are the only ones who stand a chance now." The room was silent for a moment as the weight of their mission settled in. There was no more room for mistakes, no time to waste. The Centauri were coming, and humanity's future depended on their ability to defeat an ancient enemy using the very technology they had once abandoned. Admiral Hayes turned to her crew, her voice unwavering. "Prepare for battle. We have one shot at this. Let's make it count." And with that, the course was set. The battle for humanity's survival would take them to the very heart of the Centauri's dark empire, where their enemies' secrets would be uncovered, and humanity's fate would be sealed. The weight of their mission hung heavily in the air as Admiral Hayes watched the fleet's preparations unfold. The crew of the Resolve and the rest of humanity's remaining ships worked with a sense of urgency, moving swiftly to align their tactics with the knowledge they had just gained. The Eclipse was already in position, its dark hull shimmering in the void of space, the warship a silent and ominous presence. The coordination between the two fleets was a delicate dance, but they had no choice but to trust each other. Time was running out. Hayes stood at the tactical display, her fingers hovering over the controls. She couldn't afford to make a single misstep. The Centauri's influence over their allies, especially the Volcari, had already devastated humanity once. If they failed again, there would be no recovery, no hope. She had to do everything in her power to protect the future of her people. "Admiral, all ships are in position." Commander Albright's voice broke through the tension in the command center. "We're ready for the first strike." "Good," Hayes replied, her voice steady despite the rising storm of fear inside her. "Let's make sure this one counts. We hit them hard and fast. Target their weakest ships first, those smaller Volcari cruisers that are still trying to regroup. We need to send a clear message." "Aye, Admiral. All ships are primed." Hayes felt her heart race. The Volcari were still in disarray, but they wouldn't stay that way for long. The mysterious power of the eclipse had thrown them into confusion, but if they were given time, they would regroup and adapt, just as they had done every time humanity thought they had the upper hand. This would be their one and only chance to tip the balance in their favor. "Lieutenant Ward," Hayes said, turning to her communications officer, "open a channel to Captain Darnell. It's time." Ward nodded and quickly keyed in the necessary commands. Moments later, Darnell's face appeared on the screen again, her expression focused and grim. "We're ready, Admiral," Darnell said. "We'll follow your lead." Hayes nodded. "On my mark. We make our move together." She exhaled sharply, trying to quell the anxiety threatening to overtake her. The first shot of the battle would set the tone for everything that followed. The Volkari would fight hard, but with the eclipse by their side, they might have a chance to turn the tide. Still, even with their formidable new ally, the threat of the Centauri loomed large over them. "Mark," Hayes said, her voice sharp and decisive. The signal was passed throughout the fleet. As if on cue, the human ships sprang into action. Energy blasts lit up the dark void of space as the Resolve and its allies unleashed their weapons. The first wave of Volkari ships, previously scattered and disorganized, now faced a full-scale offensive. Their shields flared as they took hit after hit, their retaliatory fire weak in comparison to the coordinated assault coming from the combined human fleet. Hayes watched the display intently, her eyes flicking between the battle unfolding and the unreadable face of Captain Darnell, who was overseeing the Eclipse's movements from her command center. The mysterious warship remained in motion, seamlessly taking down Volkari ships as though it was predestined for this battle. Every shot from the Eclipse seemed to find its mark, precise and devastating. But as the first wave of Volkari ships began to fall, Hayes felt a sharp unease settle in her chest. There was something wrong. Despite the damage being dealt to their forces, the Volkari were not retreating. Instead, their fleet seemed to be consolidating, drawing together into a more formidable formation. "They're regrouping," Albright said, his voice taut with concern. "They're preparing for a counteroffensive." "I see it," Hayes replied, her mind already working through their next steps. "They won't go down easily. Stay on target, but get ready to adjust. We can't let them recover." For a few tense minutes, it felt as though the Volkari might just manage to turn the tide of the battle. But then, something changed. A sharp, echoing pulse of energy rippled through the battlefield. The Eclipse had fired again, a massive blast that sliced through the heart of the Volkari fleet like a blade. The shockwave reverberated through space, sending smaller ships scattering and leaving larger vessels in flames. Hayes couldn't help but stare in awe. The Eclipse was no ordinary ship. It was more than a weapon. It was the key to ending this war. But it came with a dangerous truth. The Centauri were not just manipulating the Volkari. They were orchestrating this entire battle from the shadows. "Admiral, we've got a problem," Lieutenant Ward said, her voice tinged with alarm. "We've just picked up a fleet, much larger, moving from the outer rim. It's the Centauri. They've arrived." Hayes' blood ran cold. The Centauri were here. The battle had just become much more complicated. "Prepare the fleet for a full assault," Hayes barked, her voice sharp with urgency. "We take the fight to them. It's time to finish this." The unknown, terrifying presence of the Centauri loomed over them now, but the Eclipse and humanity's fleet were ready. The final stage of the war had begun, and only one side would emerge victorious. The tension in the command center was palpable. The first wave of the Volkari had been dealt with, but the real enemy, the Centauri, had arrived, and they were unlike anything humanity had ever faced. Their fleet, massive and unyielding, loomed on the horizon, a dark shadow sweeping through the stars. The Centauri ships were sleek, angular, and unsettlingly advanced, their very presence exuding a chilling aura of power. Admiral Hayes clenched her fists, her eyes never leaving the tactical display. The human fleet, though smaller and outgunned, was still standing strong alongside the Eclipse. But they knew this wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a battle to determine the future of humanity. "Admiral, we're detecting an energy buildup from their ships," Lieutenant Ward called out, her voice steady despite the urgency. "They're preparing to fire." Hayes' mind raced. The Centauri had always been known for their ability to control vast amounts of energy, but seeing it in action was a stark reminder of the sheer scale of their power. A single well-placed strike from their fleet could decimate entire sections of humanity's forces. But there was no choice. They had to take the risk. "All ships, evasive maneuvers," Hayes commanded, her voice firm. "We can't let them fire with full force." "Captain Darnell, how's the Eclipse holding up?" The screen flickered, and Darnell's face appeared, her expression focused, though there was an unmistakable glint of concern in her eyes. "We've sustained some damage, but we're holding steady. We got their attention, that's for sure. However, we're not out of the woods yet. If they concentrate fire on us, we'll be in trouble." Hayes nodded, her stomach tightening. The Eclipse was humanity's greatest asset in this fight, but it was far from invincible. If the Centauri focused their fire on it, they could cripple their best chance at victory. "We need to draw their fire," Hayes said, the wheels turning in her mind. "Prepare a decoy formation. We'll create a distraction and pull them away from the Eclipse. Get the Resolve and the rest of the fleet into position." "Aye, Admiral," Commander Albright replied, immediately beginning to relay orders to the fleet. As the human ships began to maneuver into their new formation, the Centauri ships responded, their weapons charging. The battle was about to reach its breaking point. "Admiral, I've got something." Lieutenant Ward's voice came through again, this time with a note of excitement. "I've deciphered the Centauri's comms. It's a transmission, but it's not meant for us. It's coded in a language we've never encountered before, but it's directed toward the artifact." Hayes' brow furrowed. "The artifact?" Ward nodded. "It seems like they're signaling their forces to prepare for something. I believe they're activating the artifact. If that happens, the Centauri could control entire fleets with it. We'll be completely outmatched." A cold sense of dread crept up Hayes' spine. If the artifact was activated, they wouldn't stand a chance. The Centauri would have the power to control the battlefield, to crush them with overwhelming force. The artifact was humanity's only hope for defeating the Centauri, but it also held the key to their destruction. "We need to find it," Hayes said, her voice grim, "and we need to stop it before it's too late." "Understood, Admiral," Darnell's voice came through. "We've got the coordinates to the artifact's last known location, but it's deep within their fleet. Getting close will be a risk. We'll have to find a way to slip through their defenses." "Do what you need to do," Hayes replied, her tone unwavering. "The Eclipse is our only chance. Lead the way." As the human fleet continued to engage the Centauri forces, trying to draw their fire and buy time, Hayes felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her. They were playing a dangerous game, one misstep, and they could lose everything. "Admiral," Lieutenant Ward spoke again, her voice sharp with urgency. "The Centauri are charging their main weapon. If they fire, they'll decimate our fleet. We need to act now." Hayes' heart pounded in her chest. The moment of truth had arrived. "Darnell, it's time. Get to the artifact, whatever it takes. We'll keep them busy here." The comms crackled, and Darnell's voice came through one last time, filled with a steely determination. "Understood. We'll finish this." As the Eclipse broke formation, darting into the heart of the Centauri fleet, the remaining human ships surged forward, pushing toward the Centauri vessels with all their might. The darkness of space seemed to swallow them whole as they made their final desperate charge. The battle had shifted into its most dangerous phase. "Hold the line," Hayes muttered under her breath as she watched the unfolding chaos. They were on the brink of victory or defeat. One final push would determine it all. In the heart of the Centauri fleet, the artifact's power began to surge, ready to unleash its terrible force. The fate of humanity now rested in the hands of the Eclipse and its captain, Riel Darnell. Would they be able to destroy the artifact before the Centauri regained control? Or would this be humanity's final stand? The battle for the future had only just begun. Admiral Hayes stood at the command console, her eyes fixed on the unfolding chaos outside. The human fleet, though outnumbered and outgunned, fought with everything they had, launching relentless waves of attacks against the Centauri ships. The Resolve and its allies engaged in a deadly dance, darting between incoming fire, trying to avoid the Centauri's deadly main weapon while keeping them distracted. But Hayes knew that their chances of winning were slim if the artifact was activated. The true battle was happening deep within the heart of the Centauri fleet, where the Eclipse and Captain Darnell were taking on the impossible task of destroying the source of the Centauri's power. The Centauri fleet had shifted tactics, pulling back to form a defensive perimeter around the artifact's location. Every ship was now focused on ensuring its survival. The battle outside was a diversion, but it was clear that the real fight lay within their ranks. If the artifact was activated, they would lose everything. "Admiral, we've got incoming fire," Commander Albright called out. "The Centauri are pushing forward. They're moving in for a full offensive." Hayes' pulse quickened as she processed the data. The Centauri's tactics were evolving at an alarming rate. They were adapting, and if they weren't careful, the human fleet would be overwhelmed. But they couldn't afford to retreat. The Eclipse was already too deep inside enemy lines. If they pulled back now, the artifact would remain intact, and with it, humanity's last hope. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," Hayes ordered, her voice unwavering. "Don't let them concentrate fire on any one ship. We keep them busy." But even as she gave the order, Hayes couldn't shake the feeling that this battle was slipping through their fingers. The Centauri's main weapon was charging, and if it fired, it could end the fight in an instant. The odds of survival were shrinking by the second. "Admiral," Lieutenant Ward called out, her voice rising with urgency. "The Eclipse is nearing the artifact's position. They're within range, but the Centauri are responding. The enemy ships are closing in around them." Hayes clenched her fists. The Eclipse was their final hope, and Captain Darnell was navigating the ship straight into the heart of the enemy fleet. But time was running out. Every passing second brought them closer to the point of no return. "We need to keep them off Darnell," Hayes muttered. "Albright, set course to provide covering fire for the Eclipse. We'll give them as much time as we can." "Aye, Admiral," Albright responded, immediately relaying the orders. The human fleet shifted position, targeting the incoming Centauri ships with a renewed fury. The battle outside intensified, every ship maneuvering with precision, each blast a desperate plea for survival. The Centauri were relentless, closing in on all sides, their firepower overwhelming. Yet through the smoke and the fire, Hayes could see the faint outline of the Eclipse pushing deeper into enemy territory, unrelenting in its pursuit of the artifact. Then, a flash of light. The Centauri main weapon fired. It was a beam of such intense energy that for a moment, it seemed as if the entire expanse of space had been consumed by it. The beam surged toward the heart of humanity's fleet, and Hayes' breath caught in her throat. If it hit, the devastation would be catastrophic. It could obliterate everything they had worked for, everything they had fought to protect. "Brace for impact," Hayes shouted, her voice tight with panic. The crew scrambled to adjust, the sound of alarms blaring in every corner of the ship, but there was no time to dodge. They had been too close. Suddenly, a massive explosion erupted in the distance. The beam collided with a nearby Vokari ship, but instead of decimating it as expected, the blast was absorbed by something far more powerful than anything Hayes had seen before. The Eclipse had intervened. The ship had shielded the fleet, its advanced technology providing a protective barrier against the Centauri's devastating weapon. "Captain Darnell," Hayes exclaimed, relief flooding her chest. "Did you do that?" "I'm not sure how, but it worked. Darnell replied, her voice crackling through the comms. "We're close to the artifact's location. I can see it. It's inside the core of their flagship." Hayes' heart skipped a beat. The flagship, the heart of the Centauri fleet. If they could reach it, they could destroy the artifact, the source of the Centauri's power. "Do it, Captain. Take it out," Hayes urged, her voice filled with desperation. "This is our only chance." The screen flickered as Darnell's image appeared again. "We're going in. Prepare for a final push. I'll give it everything we've got." For a moment, Hayes could only watch as the Eclipse surged forward, slicing through the Centauri forces with a ferocity that matched the stakes. It was a race against time, against the Centauri's relentless drive to secure their hold over the galaxy. The final battle had begun, and it would either be humanity's salvation or its end. The Eclipse and its crew were humanity's last line of defense, but as they neared the artifact's core, the Centauri began to fight back with all their might. Every ship in their fleet was mobilized, every weapon aimed squarely at the ship that posed the greatest threat to their power. The artifact's energy began to flare up, preparing for activation. This was it, the moment that would decide the fate of the galaxy. Would they succeed in destroying it before the Centauri could unleash their control over everything? The answer lay in the hands of Captain Darnell and the crew of the Eclipse, and time was running out. The final moments of the battle felt as though time itself was stretching, elongating with every passing second. The Centauri flagship loomed in the distance, its dark silhouette a haunting reminder of everything humanity had fought against. Captain Darnell's voice came through the comms, steady but tense, as she guided the Eclipse closer to its core. The ship was taking fire from all sides now, its hull groaning under the relentless assault, but it didn't falter. It couldn't. The future of humanity depended on it. "Admiral, we're within range," Darnell said, her tone unwavering. "But the flagship's shields are holding strong. We'll need to disable them before we can strike the artifact." Hayes gripped the armrests of her chair, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. The human fleet was doing everything it could to buy time, engaging in a fierce, relentless battle with the remaining Centauri ships. But every second spent fighting was another second the artifact had to power up. If they didn't act now, the entire galaxy could fall under Centauri control. "Focus on the flagship's shield generators," Hayes commanded. "We can't let them activate the artifact. Give Darnell the time she needs." "Aye, Admiral," Albright replied, his fingers flying over the control panel. The fleet shifted into position, firing in unison to hammer the Centauri flagship's shields. Energy blasts clashed against the powerful barrier, but the shields barely flickered. It was a powerful defense, but humanity wasn't backing down. The Eclipse surged forward, weaving between fire from the enemy ships, its advanced technology allowing it to evade the worst of the blasts. The battle outside was fierce, but inside the Eclipse, Captain Darnell and her crew were focused on the task at hand, reaching the artifact. "We're almost there," Darnell said, her voice tight. "Prepare for a full-scale assault on the flagship. We're going in." The Eclipse shot forward, cutting through the remnants of the Centauri fleet like a knife through butter. The human fleet's distraction was working. The Centauri had been so focused on maintaining their dominance in the outer skirmishes that they had neglected to reinforce the heart of their empire. As the Eclipse neared the core of the Centauri flagship, a massive surge of energy rippled through space. The artifact was activating. Its power began to pulse, an overwhelming force that seemed to reverberate through the entire battlefield. It was a signal that the Centauri were on the verge of victory, and their control over the galaxy would be complete. "No, not yet," Hayes muttered under her breath, watching in horror as the artifact's power began to take form. The glowing core inside the flagship radiated with an intensity that threatened to consume everything in its path. If Darnell didn't act soon, the artifact's power would be unstoppable. "Captain, do you have a visual on the artifact?" Hayes demanded, her voice urgent. "We've got it in sight, But the core is heavily guarded, Darnell replied. We're going to need to take out the central defenses before we can make our move. Do whatever you have to, Hayes said, her eyes narrowing. We can't afford to wait any longer. The Eclipse's weapons flared to life once more. A concentrated barrage of fire rained down on the flagship's core, each shot carefully aimed to disable the defenses protecting the artifact. The ship rocked with the force of the impacts, but it held steady, unwavering in its mission. Shields are down. Darnell called out. We've breached the core's defenses. Prepare for the final strike. Hayes' heart pounded in her chest as she watched the energy build inside the flagship. The Centauri were desperate now, their fleet moving to intercept the Eclipse. It was now or never. Admiral, we've got one shot at this. Darnell's voice crackled through the comms. If we don't destroy it now, the artifact will activate, and we'll be too late. Hayes gritted her teeth. She knew the risks. The Eclipse was in too deep. If they failed, there would be no escape. But failure was not an option. Take the shot, Hayes ordered, her voice steady but filled with determination. End this now. A heavy silence filled the comms, and then, with a roar that shook the very fabric of space, the Eclipse fired. The blast was a concentrated pulse of energy, brighter than anything the human fleet had ever unleashed. It shot forward, ripping through the heart of the Centauri flagship, and for a brief moment, everything went still. Then the flagship exploded. The blast was so intense that it illuminated the entire battlefield. The shockwave rippled outward, destroying everything in its path. The Centauri fleet was obliterated in an instant, the energy from the explosion consuming their ships as though they were nothing more than fragile paper. The artifact, the source of their power, was no more. Humanity's fleet, battered but intact, watched in stunned silence as the final remnants of the Centauri fleet were swept away by the blast. The Eclipse emerged from the heart of the explosion, its hull scared but intact. It had succeeded. Admiral Hayes let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The battle was over. The Centauri were defeated. The artifact was destroyed. Humanity had survived. But even as the victory settled in, Hayes knew that the cost had been great. They had lost many ships, many lives. The future of the galaxy was uncertain, but humanity had proven one thing today. They were stronger than their enemies ever realized. Admiral, Lieutenant Ward's voice broke through the silence. We've won. The Centauri fleet is in retreat. It's over. Hayes nodded, her heart heavy with the knowledge of everything they had sacrificed. It's over, she echoed, her voice thick with emotion. We've won. The galaxy had been saved, not by sheer force, but by the courage, sacrifice, and unity of humanity. They had faced their greatest challenge and emerged victorious. But in the quiet aftermath of battle, one truth remained clear. Humanity's place in the galaxy had been earned, and they would never be forgotten.